Let's talk about this week's astrology. This is a week where there is a deep sense of creativity at play. If we think of the idea of the divine, there are often three aspects of the divine that are recognized across most spiritual traditions, and often embodied in the idea of the triple goddess, however that manifests across those traditions. But the divine largely plays three roles. The first is creative or generative, like this springing into manifestation of new energy. There's then an energy of sustaining or creating order from that creative energy. And then there's the destruction that ultimately comes at the end of that cycle. And that destruction is not just the destruction of what has been created or the material, but it's also the destruction of illusion. It can also be a period of time where there's an elevation into a high level of consciousness. Now, that is all to say that this is a week very much about that generative, creative energy. It is about allowing seeds that have been sitting within you to be watered, to be allowed to germinate, to be allowed to bloom into life and into manifestation. And it's a particularly good week for this because there's no Mercury retrograde. So that's always helpful when we're in creative energy. And today, because the sun is conjunct Uranus, and Uranus is the great awakener, this will be the sun's first meeting with Uranus since Uranus has entered Taurus in Sidereal astrology. So we can expect almost this deep calling and even like in unexpected ways to create in the material realm, to know you are worthy of what wants to come through you, whatever that is, and also to not get hung up on the output of what wants to be created. Very often we kind of stop ourselves from being in that creative capacity because we're thinking about things like, will anyone like it? All the way back to childhood stuff like, I'm not creative, like that learnt thought, I'm not creative. You're human, you're creative by nature. And then there can also be the idea that, like, what if what I create doesn't matter? Or if it doesn't generate any income or material good or money on the back of it? And that's really, though, that focus on like the outcome of creativity is not what this week is about. And actually, it's a really great week to unlearn expectation around what you're called to create. Instead, this is all about creativity as a means to be present with life, as a means to channel the divine through you, and almost that idea of like just non attached action. How can you allow the creative juice, the creative energy of the universe to flow through you? And just allow that flow to happen. Just be present to the energy as it flows through you, knowing that whoever is meant to receive it will, knowing that whatever is meant to happen to it has nothing to do with you. And really, you know, allowing the fire of that creativity to burn without needing to control that fire or direct it. So, what can happen today with the Sun conjunct Uranus, and you might have felt it yesterday and throughout this week, we'll definitely be feeling it, is you can find that there's ideas that just pop through in really unexpected ways, like inspiration that just lands. And it can be a beautiful time to remember that it's the universe that plants those seeds of inspiration. It's not the mind and it is not the ego, and it is not you that creates. It's the divine that creates through you. And as we learn to surrender that, it becomes easier to just be a vehicle through which the divine creates. And part of that might be to create something that people go, I don't like it. But that doesn't mean the divine hasn't done its work. It doesn't mean it hasn't served through that creation. So just pay attention for that. There'll probably be a lot of Vedic astrologers and sidereal astrologers talking about the North Node and South Node switching signs today. I'm going to talk about that next week or later this week. I follow a slightly different measurement for the North and South Node. I use the True Node. It's like, it basically puts it 2 weeks off. So Ooh, I'm gonna do a long form video on the North and South Node changing signs. They're gonna be moving into Aquarius and Leo. So North Node moves into Aquarius. I will be doing that. For me, I time that on the 30th of May as being the date that that happens. But just as a heads up, you might start to feel it now, kind of from today. And it's this energy, like Aquarius is about the collective embracing revolution, embracing unconventional ways of being and embracing truth and the highest dharma. Um, yeah, so just keep that in mind. If you just notice like internally something is shifting, it's more a collective shift that we feel it at like a soul level. I will put more on that later. Probably later this week, I'll do a full video on it. Added today, I'll also just mention today, Mercury is square Mars. So just being really careful with your words this weekend, but also like Monday, Tuesday. So you might find that there can be a lot of anger that comes up through words. There can also be making promises to people and not actually fulfilling on those promises. So, you might sit down with someone and say like, yeah, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then it gets down to taking action and you just don't have the energy to do it. Like there's just not the desire to do it. So just being really careful with your words. Like if you're not sure, just don't say it. And also be really aware of where you might be promising something to someone and it's coming from a place of like people pleasing, but you're really in the moment, you might want to do it, but when you step away from that conversation, there might be the sense of like, oh God, what have I agreed to? So just be aware. Now, I'm also going to mention as well today, Jupiter is sextile Chiron. Really beautiful energy as Jupiter is now sitting in Gemini. It's really working around information, around the voice. You can learn more about Jupiter's move into Gemini. I'll put a link to the deep dive below. And in harmony with Chiron, who has also just entered Aries in Sidereal astrology, it's really about the power of the voice to create new ideas, about leading, about using the mind. Like it's not necessarily about needing to speak up, but using the mind to see the path that you want to go. Now, I am going to be running a 3-week embodied astrology journey working with Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer in the chart. Is incredibly important for understanding our inner healing gifts as well as our deepest wound, which is often around abandonment. I will put details below as well. Now, we're going to get to Tuesday. Pretty excited about Tuesday. The sun is going to be conjunct the Pleiades, which is tapping back into what I was talking about originally with all the creative energy that's going on this week. The Pleiades are a source of creative energy. They're often called the Seven Sisters. In Vedic astrology, they're the Kritika, and they're almost like the cosmic womb. They incubate ideas. And in the case of the Kritika, they incubated Murugan or Kartikeya, the god of war. They created him. And it's this mothering energy, and it lives within us, this idea of like we are mothers of the creative universe. We are mothers that have the ability to take the divine and manifest it into material form. Hence, this being a very generative and creative week. And again, like the lesson of the Pleiades really being about tuning into how the divine wants to use this vehicle. And I point up to the divine, but really, if I was being accurate, it's within you. It's sitting behind the layer of mind. The divine is not something outside of you. And it's like when we can really hook into the heart and work through the tension of the mind, we can very easily channel the divine. And it can be very easy when we do that to get to want, like the mind wants to claim what it creates. Um, And so one of the things just to watch out for this week is like where the mind clings to creation, where it thinks it's done something, where you hear I, me, or mine in regards to something that is created. It's the ego at play, trying to almost like attach or own something that the divine has actually done through you. One more thing, I will be running a Pleiades meditation. If you want to work with those divine energies, there'll be details below. So there's a lot of little things going on, aren't there? Um, Now, so that's gonna be on Tuesday. Now, as we go through the rest of the week, we have, like, where am I gonna hit? On Friday, I would say there's also a lot of energy going on. Mercury is gonna enter Taurus, so it will start to join the sun. It will be there till the 6th of June. Neptune will be conjunct Ceres. So both these things are also very creative energies. Mercury and Taurus, it's wanting to take things from the voice and from the intellect and put them into material form. So that can be the ideas that you download this weekend. It's like by the time you get to Friday, it's like, I need to write it down. I need to draw it. I need to plot it out, because creativity isn't just about art, it's about generating nothing and creating something. This can also be a period of time to the 6th of June while Mercury's in Taurus, where there's a really big focus on the value of words. You can find that you have to work through a process of even feeling unworthy of speaking up, a fear of your own voice, a fear of saying something wrong, and even conversations around money or financial agreements that can come up where you just really need to understand, like, your own worth in what you're asking for. So that can be quite a big focus. And Neptune conjunct Ceres can bring incredible dreams, incredibly creative dreams. There's a big focus on fecundity, like generative energy, fertility on Friday, but also through to next weekend with that energy. And I'll quickly mention as well, with next week on, and I'll talk about this next week though, next week on Tuesday, yeah, Monday, Tuesday, depending where you are, we have a new moon in Taurus, and it's in a nakshatra or a lunar mansion called Rohini. It is beautiful. This is the penultimate place for the moon, and it does have a creative energy to it. If you want to join that new moon, see where it is in your chart. Also, details below. That's this week. Enjoy the creative energy. Enjoy the way in which you're called to be inspired. And also noticing as well the ways in which you might resist that. The old stories that come up about maybe you not being creative or artistic, or who are you to have this idea or to do this thing. Those thoughts and that resistance is your teacher this week. So just take note, and it can show up externally, but it can also show up within you, being given the perfect situation for that resistance to your generative and creative nature. I hope you have a wonderful, enlightening week.